turn this on. Good evening. I will call this meeting to order. This is the regular meeting of the Richfield HRA on Monday, August 18th. And first item of agenda is approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of June 16th, 2014, and the special HRA meeting of July 1, 2014.
Call to order?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, I called it to
I'll
order.
moved.
roll call.
No, we don't
No?
do the roll call.
We don't do
Don't
it.
do roll? No.
Not necessary.
The attendance is noted.
We all know who we are.
Okay.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Next item is approval of the agenda.
Madam Chair, I move the agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. And then we have the consent calendar, and Mr. Devich, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chair Sandal and members of the HRA. The consent calendar, for those in the audience, is an item or separate items that are contained together and are acted upon by the HRA in one motion. Once the consent calendar has been approved, the individual items and the recommended actions will also have been approved, and no further action on the consent calendar items would then be necessary. There's only two items on tonight's consent calendar. Item A, consideration of the approval of a contract with TMS Construction for the demolition of 7029 Nicollet Avenue. And item B, consideration of the approval of a resolution authorizing the purchase of real property located at 7308 10th Avenue through the Richfield Rediscovered Program. And that concludes tonight's consent calendar.
I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I will
Oh.
move. Oops.
Moved and seconded?
Why not?
All right, thank you. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is approved. Item number 4, it's a public hearing. Mr. Devich?
Thank you. Chair Sandal, members of the HRA. Item number 4 is a public hearing, as you mentioned, and it's regarding a resolution authorizing the sale of 7225 First Avenue to Andres Construction Homes and a contract for private development for the construction of a single-family home under the Richfield Rediscovered Program. John Stark, the Community Development Director, is going to make the specific presentation to the HRA.
Mr.
Thank you.
Stark.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners.
Can you drop
Uh,
the screen?
Andres Custom Homes is applying to purchase the HRA-owned lot at 7225 First Avenue to construct a new single-family home under the Richfield Rediscovered Program. The home would be a 2-story house with 3 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, and an attached garage. The home would be approximately 2,000 square feet with an end value exceeding $330,000. I put up a copy of the plans or the renderings of the home for you to see. The HRA purchased the lot here in the fall of 2012, $405,000. The existing home was demolished. It was a substandard home. The property was a 100-foot wide double lot and was subsequently divided into 2 50-foot lots. The subdivision was approved in the fall of 2012. Andres Custom Homes bought and built the new single-family home on the south lot in 2013, which sold for $356,000. I believe, the size and design of the other house that was built is similar in nature to what's being proposed here. So with that, I think I would take any questions you might have.
Just a quick one. When we bought the property for 105, was that both lots?
Yes,
Okay, so when we're splitting it, it's certainly a fair sale price.
right, and we are, the selling price of this lot is $55,000. I don't know what it was for the other lot. I assume it was something in that same neighborhood.
Okay.
I have a excuse me,
Go ahead.
question. It in no way influences my vote, or it isn't even pertinent, but I'm trying to understand my architectural understanding. So these two houses look somewhat like they're out of the 40s. Is that indeed a style that's come back?
And I believe, this is Dustin that just came in, So he might be better at addressing
Yeah.
that than I would. So you might want to repeat the question for him.
I was wondering about the architectural style of the homes and with the pyramided pillars and the treatment around the front doors, they look like some of the homes that I remember from the 40s. Is that style coming back?
Dustin, we're asking you, yes.
Would you like to
Can
come?
you- can-
You can bring your daughter, just come on up and,
Hi.
My name's Dustin. I'm the builder. And yeah, it's a popular design. This floor plan is.
And is it one that is synonymous with houses in the 30s and 40s?
Yep. Yeah, look, it's just a typical 4-square. And yeah, there's features of it and how we trim it out and everything on the outside to kind of keep that historic look to it.
And so every housing architectural style will come back so that if we keep them long enough, we can be current?
Right.
Madam Chair?
yes, go ahead.
I took advantage of it not raining this afternoon to get on my bike and ride past the house that is pictured here, and I was surprised that it was only a 3-bedroom. It really looks much larger, and so I was very impressed by it.
Yeah, thank you. It's a good floor plan.
Well, I assume one of the benefits of going up rather than out is you can fit in more square footage on a smaller lot.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, okay. And this is a public hearing, so anyone who would like to speak on this issue may come forward. Thank you very much. Anyone wish to speak? Go ahead.
I did get a phone call from one of the neighbors, a few houses down, concerned about the size of the house. Felt like it was the one house that was built on the lot there already was larger than the homes in the neighborhood, and that the addition of this one would feel overpowering. She asked, why the house had to be so big. I told her that, from our end, we have, the HRA has some minimum requirements, and I can't tell you off the top of my head exactly what they are. I believe we require at least 3 bedrooms and at least 2 bathrooms.
Correct.
So we do have some minimum requirements. Then the city, through zoning, has some maximum requirements, height, setbacks, and those kinds of things. And I told her that historically the HRA, aside from imposing the minimum requirements, hasn't imposed any maximum requirements that are more strenuous than the city requirements. So I think she understood the answer, but she did feel like the house was too big and wanted me to pass that along.
Mr. Davidge?
Yes, Chair Sandal, if I just might add. That's one of the things that we always face when you're looking at neighborhoods that contain homes that were built in the 1940s and early 1950s, that often have the 1 bedroom or 1 bathroom, and they're smaller bedrooms. And of course, the thing that we're trying to accomplish in Richfield is to get our housing stock to the point that mirrors more of what young families are looking for today. More bedrooms, more bathrooms, a little more space, the kind of thing that, that we want to reinvent Richfield with, to make sure that people come back to Richfield to get into a home in Richfield, not just to have a starter home and be here for, the first few years until their kids reach school age or whatever, and everybody wants a bigger house or whatever, but to come here and to stay here. And see, these are the kind of homes, of course, that we need to, to take a look at putting back into the neighborhoods.
Go ahead.
I'd like to add something to what Mr. Devich said, is that, with these improved, enlarged homes in the neighborhood, it might be an encouragement to some of the people who are there to expand their homes too. Let's give the whole neighborhood a new look and an expanded look. It's happened in other parts of the community. that these are the catalysts that start people expanding their homes.
Mhm. And I think we found that since we started the Richfield Remodelers Fair umpteen years ago, is that when one neighbor does improvement, then the other neighbors look and say, oh, well, I guess it'd be okay if I did my improvement because I won't be the most expensive house on the block. You know? And they do it. So,
And to that end, I'll move we close the public hearing.
is there a second?
So-
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to close the public hearing. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. The other comment I would make is that this is a good use of city tax dollars in terms of buying small house, under 800 square feet, a very tiny garage-size house, removing it, turning around and selling the lot for a substantially improved upscale house that isn't just a starter home, but actually a move-up house for bigger families who want more modern housing with open floor plans and large amusement rooms and so on. And what that results then in is that then the city's tax base is increased because we require the house to have a certain value, substantially more than the small house that we bought. So this is a win-win for the city, and I suspect that once the house is in and the landscaping is in, that it'll fit in the neighborhood. Richfield is mostly, single-story Ramblers and story-and-a-half Cape Cods, but we do have some two-story larger homes, and they fit in. After a while, you don't notice them.
We still have some farmhouses that are two-story.
We're just going back to the past.
Mhm.
Okay. I'm going to move that we approve the resolution authorizing the sale of 7225 First Avenue to Endress Custom Homes, Inc., and authorize execution of a contract for private development between the HRA and Endress Custom Homes, Inc. for the redevelopment of 7225 First Avenue.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And thank you for coming today. We appreciate good work you're doing in Richfield. Keep it up. Item number 5, Mr. Devich.
Thank you, Chair Sandall. Members of the HRA, item number 5 is consideration of a proposal made by the owner of 7228 Aldridge Avenue for a settlement of an HRA deferred loan. The deferred loans, as you're aware, are loans that are given for the kinds of improvements that folks would make in a home, like a roof or a furnace or something that's essential to the maintenance of that home. Typically, after 30 years, those loans are forgiven. There's no interest paid during the course of the loan. In this particular case, the house is being sold on a short sale before the 30 years, and I'm going to ask John Stark to make the specific presentation on this.
Thank you, Commissioners. Thomas Burgess has owned his home at 7228 Aldridge Avenue since 1978. In 1994, he received a deferred loan from the HRA in the amount of $10,345 to make improvements to the home. The loan has, as Mr. Devich noted, a 30-year term with no interest and no payments, and it's due to be forgiven February 2nd of 2024. In other words, 20 of the 30 years have elapsed. Due to financial and personal reasons, the homeowner is attempting to sell the property to avoid foreclosure. The first mortgage balance is $158,674. Mr. Burgess has received an offer to purchase the property for $140,000. I will note that we had been tracking the listing on this house, and it has been listed for quite some time, and the price has continually gone down. So we do feel like that an effort has been made to get a greater amount. After satisfying the first mortgage, paying fees, commissions, and closing costs, Mr. Burgess is unable to repay all his debts. He is therefore requesting a settlement of the deferred loan in an amount of $1,000. The second page of the staff report has a chart showing the amount owed to each entity and the proposed settlement. I will tell you that on the settlement charges or closing costs, that's something that I've been arguing since for the last several years as these kinds of things have come to you. with the title companies that, listen, the first mortgagee or mortgager is taking a reduction. We're being asked to take a reduction. Shouldn't you be taking a reduction in either real estate commissions or title costs or any of those things? And I've gotten absolutely no traction on that. I don't think that that's going to happen. So that does show that the HRA is being asked to accept only a little less than 10% of the loan, and that U.S. Bank would be taking a little more than 75% of the primary mortgage. I do believe that Mr. Burgess's attorney is here tonight. Oh, his realtor, I'm sorry.
So he's here to offer to take less?
You can ask him that question.
Yeah, please do.
Mr. Burgess does apologize for not being able to be here tonight.
Can you go to the mic where we can, thank you.
He does apologize for not being able to be here. He did ask that I come here to represent him. Aklilu, his attorney, is also out of town.
Could you state your name then and your
Sure. My name is Greg
address?
Hineker with Presidium Properties. And
And you're the listing realtor?
I am the listing realtor, yes.
Okay.
There is, just to address your question, nothing has been brought to me with regard to any kind of reduction package. I guess, certainly that I would probably let the attorney address that if they were to come up. There are 2 agents on this, so there is also a selling agent that does have to pay as part of this. I do try not to work for free, but I'm also sensitive to what's happening. The bottom line, and there's a lot of mitigating details with this, and I don't want to take time to go through all of them. The bottom line here is if this doesn't go through, I mean, the property is going to go into foreclosure. We can't get a sale. We will let it go back to the bank. And there's not enough in the home with the appraisal. The appraisal came in at $148,000. A lot of condition issues with the property as well. And it doesn't take care of the first lien holder. So that's where it's.
Any questions?
I
Madam
have
Chair,
questions.
just-
Yeah.
Oh,
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, I just did a quick calculation here, and if we looked at that, it's about 2/3 of the loan. That means that if we were looking at it deferred, it'd be about $3,300. I think that $1,000 is a reasonable offer. Just a thought, considering the circumstances and health issues.
I'm sorry, I didn't follow that. What were you
Well,
saying?
I'm looking at what's left over for what they're
Amortizing.
amortizing it. And looking at what it would be. He's in there 20 years of the 30 years, so that's
Okay.
2/3,
Okay.
so
I gotcha.
approximately. So,
Go ahead.
I will defer to Mr. Devich.
Thank you.
ahead.
Members of the HRA, these are difficult ones for us because we're not in the first position, and the person or the entity in the first position gets they get to have the say. I know that they asked the first mortgager to give more money towards this. They started out asking for $6,000 to go to the HRA. The most that the bank would concede is $1,000. And bear in mind, if this doesn't go through and it goes into foreclosure, the HRA is likely to get nothing. It's not a great bargaining position to be in, but I think it's fair to point out that's really unfortunately where we sit.
Did you have a comment?
Thank you very much. It's just an exercise in futility in the end.
the mic?
In the end, I will just let it go. It's an exercise in futility to discuss this kind of thing.
All right. Any further discussion? I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the proposal made by the owner of 7228 Aldrich Avenue for a settlement of the $10,345 deferred loan in the amount of $1,000.
Second. Any further discussion? All right, call the question. All in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you
very
for your
much for coming. We appreciate that you took the time.
Mhm.
All right, next item. Number 6. Mr. Devich?
Chair Sandall, members of the HRA, as you know, each year we have a responsibility to consider the forthcoming year's budget and the tax levy. And you know, the budget, of course, really takes a look at what is it that we're trying to accomplish in the next fiscal year, and what are the resources that we're going to have to try to accomplish those things. This is kind of a two-part presentation tonight. I'm going to ask Community Development Director John Stark to start off and make a PowerPoint presentation regarding the budget of the HRA for revised 2014 and the 2015 fiscal year. And Mr. Regis can follow up with some of the financial aspects of that budget.
All right, thank you, Chair Sandall and Commissioners. Just to give you an overview of the department, I like to do this every year because you see me and Steve and Karen, but there are a lot of people that work for the HRA that you don't see. So I'd like to mention that there are 17, in community development, there are 17 full-time and 3 part-time employees. The department's total proposed budget for 2015 is approximately $5 million. The 2015 proposed budget represents a $1.5 million decrease from the amount you approved last year for this year. Approximately 27.5% of community development's proposed 2015 budget comes from the city, and that's in our inspections division, our planning and zoning division, and funding the majority of economic development. The remaining 72.5%, or $3.6 million of the department's budget, is funded through the Richfield HRA. That's staffing that works primarily for the HRA, or at least in large part. There are 8.5 full-time equivalent staff members, myself, and I give here the percentage of time that we allocate to the HRA versus the city. Myself, 65% of my time is spent on the HRA. Assistant Director Karen Barton is a little shy of 80% of her time. The housing specialists, which are Julie Urban and Kate Aitchison, they work primarily on Richfield Rediscovered and Transformation Homes and some other programs. They spend 100% of their time working for the HRA. The accountant, Mertlink, spends 85% of her time. Jackie, I know you hear from Jackie. She spends about 65% of her time. Christine Costello in economic development, 32% of her time is charged to the HRA. And then Matt Brillhart, who is a technician, spends about a third of his time on the HRA. Then we've got Section 8. The 2 technicians, Michelle Luna and Cynthia Velde, who's part-time, spend 100% of their time on Section 8. And Lynette Chambers, the Section 8 coordinator, about 82% of her time goes to the HRA. I will mention, though, and we've touched on this at a work session a few months ago, most of their salaries, however, are paid through the federal government. So again, the overall HRA budget, what's being proposed for 2015 is $3.6 million. What was approved for 2014 was $5,170,830. For the remainder of this year, we're revising actually that it goes up a little bit for the remainder of this year before then it goes down next year. The reason it's going down is 3 reasons really. One is a lot of programs and projects that we've been involved in are coming to an end here in the next short while. And then secondly, our declining assets and income stream. You know, we will see a little later that the HRA levy, their taxes, we lose a little bit of that, but the income that we're getting from tax increment and from the sale of assets or assets that we haven't sold that we're sitting on really leave us in a cash situation where we've had to make some cuts. This decrease, which is a little over 1.7 million, is primarily due to completing the city garage and mortuary demolition this year, completing the NSP, which is the Neighborhood Stabilization Program, that acquisition and rehab program, which is a reduction of $110,000. Now, that is pass-through funds. Those are federal funds, not ours, but they still show up in our budget. Completion of the matching funds for the Lindale Gardens streetscape improvements will be done this year. And then we are proposing to eliminate the curb appeal pilot program. We had budgeted $20,000 for that. We'd also budgeted money for a rental conversion program to help people that had single-family homes that were once upon a time owner-occupied, had turned into investment properties. So there was a program to help get those back to owner-occupied. We did some surveying, we did some focus groups. We found more interest in the rental conversion program, and the feeling was we couldn't afford to fund both programs. And so what we're suggesting is we move forward with just the rental, conversion program. And then general cutbacks of discretionary spending in all of the HRA funds.
So, may I just interrupt because I'm looking at this, so the declining assets and income are about 1.3 million of that decrease, because I see about 400,000, 450,000 here
Yeah.
in others.
Yeah.
So that's a large decrease.
Yeah, there are a lot of reasons for that. One of them is the way that the legislature changed the market value homestead tax credit and how that affects
yes,
tax
some time
increment
ago.
financing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The way that the HRA budget typically anticipates a best case scenario where everything happens in a given year, and that's almost never the case. You'll see here over the years, the amounts of budget that the HRA has approved, and then typically we expend somewhere between 55 and 75%. 2012 was the kind of aberration there, and I think what you'll see is between 2010 and 2011, the approved budget shrank dramatically, and then in 2012, the actual expenditures probably just didn't quite keep up with that. So the expenditures were, so that's the case there. This is probably a little too wordy, but I just want to read through it and let you know the accomplishments here in 2014 to date. So the last 8.5 months, 6 Richfield rediscovered homes were constructed in 2014, and we're expecting 6 or more new constructions in 2015. So that's a phenomenal program, and it always has been. Construction of 2 affordable new homes in 2014. Acquisition of at least one substandard home for future new construction. Allocation of $115,000 in CDBG funding to provide up to 4 deferred rehab loans to low-income households. $10,000 in transformation home loans have been originated to date. 1 rental to home ownership loan has been originated, so that's the program I'd mentioned. The development of a Latino outreach program, the implementation of a housing marketing plan, providing Section 8 vouchers to over 300 families, and funding to serve up to 30 Richfield families through the Kids at Home program. In redevelopment, the areas that we've seen activity in are Lindale Station, the LA Fitness development. Lindale Gardens, we saw obviously lake winds this year, and we're hoping to see more before the end of the year. The Lakes at Lindale Connectivity Plan, the HRA's approved the plan. They've approved the funding for some of the implementation. You'll start seeing the implementation later this year and definitely into next spring. The Cedar Corridor redevelopment area, primarily the HRA decision to allow an assessment of the properties along Richfield Parkway to get that project moving. And then kind of together, the LaMetri Auto Body and the Richfield Bloomington Honda and Mitsubishi properties are underway. Other initiatives in 2014 and 2015, these are proposed. The Penn Avenue Improvement Program, $120,000. Rental Conversion Program, $60,000. Economic Development, I have here $108,000. That's the whole personnel side of that. The HRA, like I said, contributes about 32% of that. The Lakes Lindale Connectivity Plan that I'd mentioned, implementing that will be $140,000 over the next year and a half. Some of that is grant funded. $17,000 in marketing efforts, $5,000 in energy efficient homes rebate program, $40,000 in the Fix Up Fund home improvement loan write-down program for low-income families, $500,000 in the Cedar Corridor, and that's for continuing acquisition in that area. Implementation steps for the housing vision, and then what we're proposing is local HRA funding of Section 8, as we talked about at the work session prior to this year. All the money that went into Section 8 came from the federal government. There hasn't been enough money coming in from the federal government to fund the program. So we're suggesting that in 2014, the HRA funds $24,100 to Section 8, and then next year it'd be reduced a little bit to $20,460. That would do two different things. One is that would allow us to staff it at existing levels. Secondly, that gives us, I believe the total was $15,000 to pay back what the federal government feels that we owe them. I can double check that number. 10,000, sorry. 5 each year, yep. And, you know, if we don't have to give that to the federal government, we won't. You know, we're trying to keep passing that off and hoping that there's some policy change there. And there are a couple of questions.
Okay,
Mine's
go
on
ahead,
a different
Doris, and
topic,
then-
so go ahead.
The Lakes Connectivity Plan, there's some sidewalk realignments and all kinds of things like that that have been proposed for that. And I know that there is discussion about realignments of 66th Street. And I'm just wondering if this is really the best time to do that, if there's going to be some rebuilding on 66th Street, to have, you know, can't we sort of try to do it all at the same time
Right.
instead of wrecking it up twice?
Yep, and you had brought that up when we had the contract with the consultant that was going to be doing the implementation.
So it's still
And so
here.
we, after the meeting where you brought that up, we had that conversation with engineering and with the consultants.
Mhm.
And what we talked about was all of the improvements would be one of two things. Either they wouldn't be on Lindale itself, they'd be on, or it wouldn't be on 66th, I'm sorry. They would be in areas that are not forecast to be changed, so they would be permanent. Or if there were improvements in places that were subject to be torn up in the future, that they be the types of improvements that are the most easily reusable and movable. For example, putting the streetlights in. You know, a streetlight, I think the number was somewhere in the neighborhood of $15,000. Well, about $13,500 of that is in the actual fixture. It's not in the base or the electrical work that would go there. So we feel like on some of those, you'd maybe lose 2, 3, 5% of the value at most. And even with that, it's a smaller piece of the puzzle. Most of what would happen there wouldn't be affected.
I hope so.
Was there a question here, Mary?
Yes, when I was looking over the budget CD that you sent us ahead of time, it mentioned that you wanted to do research on municipal parking, and I don't see that here, but I've been hearing from a lot of people that is a concern, so I was very pleased that that was there as we redevelop, that we need to make sure we have enough parking. So can you talk a little more about that?
I can, and I'd have to look in the budget documents to see the amount we allocated to that, but we did allocate funding to having a consultant work with us on designing something that would work hopefully on HRA-owned property or on property that a developer would grant to the HRA. So that's something, you know, we're continuing to look into.
And
Thank
just,
you.
oh, you did?
Go ahead.
Okay, I had another question just in general in the budget, because it's not up here and there's probably people watching about, you know, we've been buying up properties and everything like this. How much money is actually in the budget, and maybe you'll have to look this up, Chris, to buy lots? because I know we're short of lots, and buying these lots and the homes and going around to sell those, or do we have this? John, is that? Maybe, because people really look at that, and I can't tell you when I'm out and about, some people are looking at moving out of the houses they have, and I said, well, why don't you buy a lot in Richfield? And they said, I didn't know you could. Do you have some? I said, yes, we have a couple left yet. But I'm wondering how much we've allocated, and this, of course, gets back to the concern about how much are we budgeting for, and or what do we have, and do we have enough to buy up some properties?
If I could just comment.
Please.
I was going to kind of save this to the end.
Okay,
But
I'm
as long
sorry I
as
burst your
we
bubble.
kind of no, it's okay, because we have kind of a natural pause here while John looks that up. You know, I have to say that I think if you look around our community and you listen to what people say about this community, what we've been able to accomplish in the last, especially the last 4 or 5 years, I think has made a dramatic improvement in Richfield and what people think about Richfield and people wanting to come back to Richfield. The things that have happened around especially Lindale and 66th, around the Cedar Corridor, those kinds of things. Along with that, like the few examples tonight that we saw with Richfield Rediscovered, that program that we started so long ago, back in 1990, to take a lesser valued home on a block and replace it with something that's dramatically more valuable, that is attractive to families that would come and stay here. Those are the kind of things that we need to keep working on in Richfield.
Exactly.
Sadly, you can see from the budget that we put in front of you, and John knows when he came to me with the budget in the first place, that I sent him back downstairs and said, try again, John, because I'm not going to go forward with the budget that you have, both for the HRA and the city. And that's because we just simply don't have the funds that we had to do these programs. And I don't think I'm being too much of an alarmist to say, but I think that this is a time when the HRA and the city are going to have to really take a really hard look at what you want the HRA to accomplish in this community, because we have a very limited source of general tax resource coming into the HRA. You'll see when Chris talks to you that it's reduced from last year. There's a statutory formula. It says you get a certain percentage of your total tax base, and that's all you can levy, and you can't levy anymore. And it's not very much money. It's not even come close to the kind of money that we'd like to have to do the kind of programs that we want. We were fortunate when the economy was down that John and his staff were able to go out there and pick up a lot of properties at a very attractive price. And now you've seen that we've come forward in the last couple of years and put homes on those properties. We had a very nice inventory of lots. We don't have that big of an inventory of lots anymore. And John, you'll find it, or if you haven't found it, how much, what we have looking at for the next year to purchase lots, but it's not anywhere near what I wish we had.
No, and Richfield Rediscovered is a great microcosm of the financial situation that the HRA is in that we were opportunistic at the time, in 2008, 2009, 2010, where the market was at its worst. We said, well, this is a time for us to acquire properties. And so we took a lot of the cash we had available to us, acquired properties for Richfield Rediscovered, had great new houses built that are going to pay a lot of taxes. The issue, though, is when we pay the money out in 2008 or 9 or 10 or 11, that's a one-time expenditure that depletes our cash, and it takes 25 years then, because these are all their own individual TIF districts. And they each pay the HRA some admin funding, and they each pay the HRA back for the money that was invested in acquiring and demolishing the house and all those things. But the payback takes 25 years. And so I think in 10 years or 15 years, that the HRA that's sitting at the dais then will look back at the activities that you did and be very proud and say that, we've got all this tax increment rolling in now on all these Richfield Rediscovered homes to pay back the sacrifices that this group made. But the sacrifice is that we can't keep doing it at that level. Right now, what we have budgeted for next year is $400,000 to buy substandard and small homes. We were at a number of like 1.1 million, 1.2 million a few years back. It's been easing back. One of the other reasons we decided to acquire so many properties was because, again, there were so many properties on the market, and there weren't as many home buyers out there willing to go through the Richfield Rediscovered Credit Program that we have, where they do all the legwork. They acquire the house, they demolish it, they rebuild, and we give them I believe it's a $50,000 credit. Now, with the way the market has changed and the way supply and demand is operating, we're seeing more people willing to do that credit. So I think we will see just as many Richfield Rediscovered homes happening in the future. I think we'll see more of them as the credit program, which is more cost advantageous to us, and fewer where we do all the legwork.
So,
Go ahead.
Are we looking at other new programs? I had a talk today with a gentleman who bought a house on my street, and he's going to flip it. He's putting a lot of money into the house because it was in pretty bad shape. Internally, externally, it's really a nice property. And, I know right now he doesn't qualify for anything. But there's probably a lot of homes out there, could we start thinking about encouraging individual developers who flip homes, to help them do even more, because they improve the home before they sell it substantially.
Yeah, for us to, do a program like that, it's an expenditure, so we would have to find somewhere else to reduce that cost somewhere else to make that work.
Yeah.
Really where we're focused right now is on trying to identify more revenue sources,
Yeah.
so that we can come back to you next year and say we can fund more programs or fund the existing programs better because we've identified new revenue sources.
Well,
We're also
got to do some creative
meeting
revenue.
we've met with Senator Franken's staff, and we're meeting with Representative Ellison's staff tomorrow to seek some relief on Section 8 funding. So that would help us immensely as well.
and that's one of the next places I was going, is to say that we've met again with Senator Franken's office. We're meeting with Congressman Ellison's office tomorrow. It is essential that cities like Richfield get the money back that we're spending administering Section 8. And I have a huge problem with the fact that the money that they've given us in the past, there's two parts of the money, part used for administration and part used for the homes themselves,
The vouchers, yep.
the vouchers. And you couldn't, apparently, according to the federal government, you couldn't mix and match that money. And that's something that we did, because if you're more efficient on one, it can save, you can use the money on the other. That kind of thing's got to get straightened away. It's important for a city like Richfield, I believe, to be out in the community. The community we know best. We know better than the county. We know better than the Met Council. And I'm not saying anything in a pejorative sense about those entities. I'm simply saying we're the city. We live here. We're the staff. We know best how to administer Section 8 in our community. We work with our police department. We work with other departments within the city to make sure that that program is operating as efficiently and as effectively as it possibly can. That's what works best, is when you're administering a program like that on the local level. But I will tell you that I don't believe that this city can, in the long term, subsidize Section 8 unless you're willing to sacrifice some of the other programs that the HRA has going here. And what so bothers me about that is that this city, this HRA, is so innovative in the kinds of things that we've done and the things that we could do if we had the money. When you look at the housing turnover and what we've done with Richfield Rediscovered and bringing the kinds of move-up housing in this community and new families in this community, that's part of the lifeblood of what's going to sustain a community like Richfield. And while you have these other programs we're working with commercial development, yes, that's happening, but it's a two-part thing. You've got to get the housing, you got to get your housing stock to be competitive, and there are more and more people who say, I don't want to drive across the river. I want to be in a place where I can walk, bike, take public transit to get to where I'm at. And Richfield is a place where that can happen. And so we've got to put together the kind of housing options that folks want and can move in our community. You're not going to be able to do it with buying 4 or 5 lots a year for Richfield Rediscovered. So it's very important. Anybody that has any connection with our federal representatives and senators, it is crucial that they give us enough money to operate Section 8, because the $20,000, $24,000, and $20,000 respectively that you see that we're using to help fund Section 8 is money that could go to another program, is money that could go towards buying another lot. And when you're down to the scarce resources that we're down to, that's really important. The other thing I'm going to say, and it is that, we do have some redevelopment opportunities, but I think that one of them that the HRA and the city are going to have to make sure that we look at carefully is making sure that we don't take too long to complete the redevelopment at Cedar Avenue Phase 2. Because when we went ahead with the purchase of those properties and went ahead with that project, I did set aside, Chris and I set aside funding to pay for the first couple of years of paying for those assessments, et cetera. But when those first couple of years are gone, we were anticipating that there would be a project sitting there. And if there's not a project sitting there, that means, that there are other resources that are going to have to come from the HRA to make those payments. I think we're covered for at least a couple, for the. So I covered it some years ahead, but I won't be here to deal with it, and I won't be here to look at it, but I'm
We got to
telling
watch
you.
this, okay. All right, that's good
But
advice.
I'm telling you that this is something you have to keep your eye on, because you don't want to get to that point. You want to make sure that you're ahead of the curve, so you're not spending those dollars to have to take care of that. There's so many programs that I know, like I said, when John came to me this first budget, I looked at it, and it's stuff I would have loved to have done. But to be honest, if we would have had with some of the programs, we'd be spending down the equity of the HRA, so in a couple of years, you'd be looking at some really, not only not doing some program, but some drastic reductions in the HRA staffing, and you can't afford to do that. You just simply can't afford. If you want to keep on moving ahead, you've got to maintain what little of the staff that we have left there, and you've got to find a way to get the resources to get the programs done that you need.
And can you explain to us just quickly, City Manager, about the roadblocks of raising the HRA any further than we are, and why we can't raise the budget further?
Yes.
Can you explain that more so people understand
Right.
that?
It's an interesting concept, but in the state of Minnesota, a taxing entity like the Housing Redevelopment Authority, you have the authority to adopt a tax levy, but you only have the ability to do it, and there's a chart up there that John's looking at. There's a statutory limit that has a formula right in the statute that says that a Housing and Redevelopment Authority may levy a tax up to a maximum of, and that percentage, Chris might, 0.185% of your total market value. You cannot, if you even wanted to, levy more money than that for an HRA. And what we've had to do in the last several years, we've levied to the maximum,
Yeah.
but when you look at the chart that's up there, and that's part of the crux of the problem we've been looking at since 2009, the levy's gone down, and that's because our statutory ability to levy money has been tied to what happened in the real estate market and the decline of value. So that decline of value, you can see, took a pretty good hit for several years on our ability to levy money to run the HRA. Well, there's not a lot of other sources of money to run an HRA. John talked about the Richfield Rediscovered program, excuse me, and when those were set up, they were all set up as individual tax increment districts. But a lot of those districts have matured and have been closed out. And so again, that money came in, it was a closed out fund. Chris can talk about that more in detail than I do, because it's really counting beans, Chris, and that's just kidding. But,
Chris.
you know, that money's there. It was, as John said, it was there. We got to use it. But it's not going to be, you know, that's not going to continue to be there because those districts are closed off. And so.
Is there an opportunity to talk to our representatives before this next session about the problem? I'm sure we're not the only city here, and about maybe some changes to the statute so that we could, for HRA, or at the state level?
We could, but I will tell you that, Commissioner, I'll tell you that that's a long-standing statute, and I think it'd be a real challenge to get that to change.
Oh.
And it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate
Yeah.
because, you know, you live and die by what's happening in the real estate market. Again, if the real estate market takes a dive and your market values go down, boom, you know, you're in a position where you're not going to be able to levy the kind of money you did the year before. If you think about it, if we would have had the same level of funding coming in that we had before, at the same time that market was down, we could have picked up even a lot more lots than we had. And we could have had a huge inventory and done the kind of programs, you know, that we've been able to do so successfully. So I go back to those couple of things. One, that you've got the kind of limitations in the HRA. You don't have the kind of flexibility you have as a city council. You have the Section 8 program, which is so valuable and so well run in Richfield. But the federal government has got to step up and pay us the money that it takes to run the program. When they unallotted money, or what did they call it? They sequestered funding a couple of years ago in the federal government. What people don't understand is that meant that our money coming in from the federal government to run Section 8, I don't know what we were expecting that year, but whenever they sequestered it, they just cut off the payments to us. They didn't make those payments up, ever. We had to take that.
Yeah, that wasn't just admin, that was the payments for the vouchers as well.
Oh, yeah, the vouchers for so the city, the HRA out of its pocket had to pay those voucher costs, those administration costs that the federal government just cut and dropped on us. And it wasn't just a few bucks, it was significant.
Yeah.
So it's every other city should be screaming about this.
Yeah, and the thing about it is, Commissioner, is that a lot of other cities have turned over their HRA or their Section 8 function, you know, to like perhaps the Met Council or to the county. And you could do that, but I will guarantee you, they don't have enough staff to do the job right. And I think that there's a very strong connection between operating a good Section 8 program in your community and eliminating a lot of housing problems that you could otherwise have.
Oh, we've
And
had
as I
enough here, and we're dealing with them, yes.
We get the problems right away. Because Lynette Chambers, who
Yes.
runs the program,
That's
she's
great.
so on top of this stuff
It's great.
that those problems don't get a chance to fester in this community. And again, it goes back down to, you know, local government can run this program the best, but for crying out loud, the federal government has got to give us enough money to pay for it.
Wait, Doris had a question, and then John, you want to comment?
Well, one of the things that, if I am correct, that we, where we get our funding for Richfield Rediscovered, et cetera, and transformation homes, is payback on loans that we have made. Am I correct? And every time we accept significantly less than what was lent, it takes a little piece out of me, because I know that we're not going to be able to lend that to somebody else. We had hoped to be able to lend that money to somebody else. So it's just a function of the market, unfortunately, but it's a secondary thing as to why our money is not available. In the past year, how much money did we write off?
Oh, lots.
$60,000, $70,000 or so, that we only recovered $16,000.
I know.
And again, Commissioner, that's a situation where, you know, if you hadn't done that, a lot of those places would have gone in foreclosure, and we would have got, you know, nothing. And that's just an unfortunate part of what we deal with. But, you know, as you can see, and as you just pointed out, there's a lot of obstacles for us to overcome.
Madam Chair.
John had something
Well,
he wanted to comment first. And then,
Just an observation, and I might be in the minority here, but I'm very optimistic about how we're going to be funding the HRA in the next few years. the way real estate values are, it's always kind of a couple of years behind. And we've seen the real estate values themselves going up the past few years. The taxable value that is assigned to them just kind of lags behind that. And when you think about where we get most of our funding from, there's one is grant funding, and that's almost always for bricks and mortar. And we're still doing a great job of securing grant funding. And so things like the connectivity plan or different infrastructure improvements, we're going to get the money, get those bricks and mortar things done. But where the bulk of the rest of our money comes from is three things. It's the levy, which we've talked about. It's the 15% of most of our TIF districts fund into what we call the Housing and Redevelopment Fund. 15% of the TIF off of Best Buy or some of these others is a sizable amount of money.
Yeah.
And then 10% of all of the TIF districts pay for admin, which is personnel costs for the HRA. As soon as we see some market value increases showing up in the tax collection, all three of those, I believe, are going to continue to increase over the next few years. And I'm hoping that things are going to be getting better.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yes, as long as we're second-guessing John's budget. I have a somewhat unrelated question. So the levy that we can tax went down because of the value of Richfield's property, but hasn't the value gone back up, or are we looking at 2 or 3 years?
The
previous-
levy is calculated on the pay 214 taxable or estimated taxable market value. You're correct in that
But didn't
the
13
215
Yeah,
levy or market value is increasing, will increase, because the Hennepin County assessor has told me such, but the HRA levy, the way it's backwards, basically you
So
have to
we're-
go back
we're
a
year
year
out.
to the
But-
pay 2014 is what you calculate the levy on.
but wasn't 214 better than 213?
No.
Okay.
Would have thought so, but it would not, so
Then
interesting.
I'm glad that you brought up the Section 8 thing, because we had you made us aware of that challenge, and that was somewhat of a concern to me. I thought it was more problematic than 20 grand a year, so, but it looks like you have that in hand. The rental conversion program you said was going to change in some manner?
No, that one's not. It was a pilot program.
Oh, and you made it permanent?
That's the suggestion here. We've issued one loan so far as a pilot loan. But if this budget, if tonight you tell me that we're going in the right direction, my suggestion is that we make that a permanent program.
And then I was glad to see that you have adopted a Penn Avenue improvement program. And you had to do that because you couldn't get the funding source that you had hoped to for this year?
Well, we are now looking at community development block grants as a fund. We're kind of in the process of figuring out exactly how we can spend that money. This is probably more detail than you'd want to know, but with community development block grant being federal funds, you then have to follow all kinds of federal guidelines. One of those is wages and hiring practices and all of those things. What we had intended to do on Penn Avenue was kind of micro grants or micro loans to businesses up and down Penn Avenue. What we learned then was that if I were to give a micro grant or a micro loan, or you were to Devani's Pizza to do some infrastructure improvements out front, that they would have to follow the federal government's hiring practices. And following the practices themselves isn't so difficult. It's all the documentation. You essentially you have to hire a consultant to come in and do all those things for you. And it's just cost prohibitive. So now we're looking at different ways of doing that. We're suggesting probably the money would be spent in the right-of-way as a city project, on lighting, on signage, on benches, on those kinds of things, so that it's one contract. We can follow the federal guidelines, but it's more efficient to do all as one big project. That's where we're at now. That one is kind of ever-changing until we get it nailed down. I don't think we'll get that one nailed down probably for another month or two.
Doris?
Just one last question from me, I think. The rent-to-own house, the one, which one, where's that located?
I don't have the address off the top of my head.
Do you know more or less where it is?
I don't. I'm sorry.
Okay. Because
Sorry.
I talked with a neighbor who I believe is the person who's the rent-to-own, and she's doing a lot of work to improve the place. So I hope that's the one you made the loan to.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else to continue on the
Well, I
budget?
think at this point I'd hand it off to Chris if he has anything to add.
Have we beat you enough?
This is a tag team here.
Well, as you know, the HRA's bylaws, require that an annual budget be submitted to the HRA commissioners for approval, and that's what we're doing tonight. In addition, state statutes require an adoption of a preliminary tax levy from each taxing authority, and the proposed levy must be certified to the Hennepin County Auditor by September 15th, 2014, and that's what we're here to approve tonight, and then I'll do the certification to the auditor. Any amendments to the proposed budget, which would increase the tax levy, well, we can't do that based on the formula, would have to be made prior to September 15th. And as John has mentioned, the actual tax levy decreases 0.66% less from last year's levy and things like that. And again, that's based on the pay 2014 estimated taxable market value. So that's pretty much, and the levy is set at, I believe, $468,296, which is slightly less than last year. I think last year was $471,000. So that's what we're here to do.
So I'll move we levy to the max.
I think there's a little more to the resolution.
We have the resolution, we should go back to it. Yeah.
Isn't that what it means?
Well, kind of.
All right, where's my,
I'll make the motion if you'll second it, Mr. Geffner. I'll make a motion to adopt the attached resolution approving the 2015 proposed Housing and Redevelopment Authority budget and tax levy and 2014 revised Housing and Redevelopment Authority budget.
And I will second it.
and that is your levy to the max.
Yes, I know.
Yeah, that is. And we don't do this lightly because we think what we're doing is very important.
Indeed, we
Nice
do.
job.
Yeah. It may be funny, but it's not a lot of money to do a lot of good work.
Yeah, we do a lot with that.
So,
This is the entire community benefits from this. All ships rise on this.
Madam Chair? Go ahead.
Before we vote, I also wanted to thank the city staff for all the detail they provided us, because I know we had a number of questions and they answered everything, so thank you.
Okay. And I can hear the rain on the roof.
Yep, they said it
Yeah.
would.
Yeah. Well, I said, I'm going to leave my umbrella at home because I know we need the rain. That's what I said. All right. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 7 is HRA discussion items.
Madam Chair, I have one that I'd just like to bring up about one of the items that was also on here. There was a resident sitting in here who was next to the house that was being developed by Dustin Enders. And she was a little bit miffed. She was trying to be a good neighbor, and they came over and used electricity extensively, and to the point where it was knocking her breaker out, and water. And perhaps we could talk to him and ask him to make sure that he does things differently from this on out. I mean, he builds nice homes, and I don't know if it was him or this crew that was working with him, but can we make sure that that's not happening? That's not acceptable.
Or that he
And-
pays for it.
Well, he did, but that still was way too inconvenient, and using her water and her electricity and throwing her breaker. They bring on-site electricity and they bring on-site water. And I know how those construction projects go. It's one thing to use it one day, it's another thing to use it continuously, and they did, just so you know. Okay? Thanks.
Okay.
I have a question. John, in the Lindell Station project, the restaurant corner is coming up in September where they have their 2-year moratorium on putting a restaurant in. Is something possibly going to happen? Or are they going to forego that incentive?
Well, there wasn't a moratorium. The way it worked out was
I-
the city
yeah.
sold them the property, said that we're selling it to you for, I believe it was $50,000.
Mm-hmm.
And if by the end of August of this month,
Yeah.
they had started construction on a property with a restaurant that, I don't even know if the restaurant was a requirement, but if they'd started construction on a development there, that they would get refunded $49,999 of that. They do have a proposal. It will not be under construction by the end of August, but if all goes well at the Planning Commission, the City Council, it should be under construction by the end of October. So the City Council voted to extend that deadline out a few months. What they're proposing is a burger place called My Burger. There's one in the, I can't think of the name of the development. It's where Lake turns into Excelsior, right north of Lake Calhoun. So there's one there. Calhoun Square, is that what that's called?
Yeah, no,
No, that's,
Excelsior and Grand.
I can't remember the name of that development, but
Yeah.
that's where one is. And the other one is in the Stadium Village area of the U of M campus. So it's called My Burger. You can look them up online. They've got pretty interesting marketing on their site. They're also-
L-I-E?
I'm sorry?
You said Lie Burger, L-I-E?
My.
M-Y.
Okay.
Lie Burger wouldn't be as popular. And they are also proposing a coffee shop. They're talking to both Caribou and Starbucks. The last I heard, they had not narrowed down. And then there would be one or two, kind of small and sundry kinds of things along with that. So like I said, as long as the Planning Commission and City Council approve that, they could be under construction here soon.
Thank you for the update.
I had a question. Has there been any further development or anything happening along Cedar Point in terms of the adjacent to Richfield Parkway?
Yeah, we continue to talk to developers about the site. I would say we talk to approximately 4 per month. It's kind of a pattern. We talk to developers, and one of two things happens. I would say 3/4 of them tell us we're interested in doing senior housing there because of the market, because of funding sources, whatever. So that's 3/4 of them. We tell them that we'd be happy to continue to work with them on that. But in fairness, we don't want them to feel misled. We share with them that Sherman had proposed a senior housing development that was ultimately turned away by the HRA and City Council because the feeling was that ultimately senior might be what would happen there, but I think that what I heard was the HRA wasn't ready to kind of concede that yet. So that's 3/4 of them. The other 1/4 of them say this is a tough nut to crack financially to make the numbers work. We work with them for 3-4 meetings, and it just kind of fizzles out because they can't make the numbers work on non-age restricted market rate projects. It's kind of the experience we've been having. But all it takes is one developer to be able to put it together, and so there's interest. That's the good thing. There's continuing interest.
So with time passing and all of us getting older, is senior housing looking better?
Well, one of the things we tell them is one of the issues we hear from the policymakers is that senior housing, everybody understands that the immediate need for senior housing is there. There's some concern about the long-term need, 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, 30 years down the road. And what we're trying to convince them of is that if they were to come forward with a senior housing proposal, that it be designed in such a way that it would be easily convertible to something not senior when the market changes. The good news is for a lot of senior housing that's possible. The bad news is that is the type of senior housing we have too much of, kind of the independent living stuff. What everybody keeps telling us is what they feel we really need is memory care and more assisted living. And those are, the square footages that you allot to each person are smaller, and that those would be harder to convert in the future. So it's, we're continuing to work on it, but that's where we're at.
I had a good and welfare item. I understand that one of our wonderful staff members, Karen Barton, recently got married, and I'd like to congratulate her.
Yep, Karen Barton got married on Saturday. I'll pass that along.
Seems to be the thing to do this summer.
Okay, anything else to discuss from the HRA? Executive Director's report?
Madam Chair, members of the HRA, I don't have a specific report, but looking at another year and looking at another budget, I think everybody on the HRA can look back and take a look at what we've done during the past year, past fiscal year, and I think feel pretty good about what's happening in Richfield. And I only hope we can continue.
Thank you. Thank you. Claims and payroll, and I think it's probably
So
been
moved.
stuck at me.
Second. And there's two of them.
Yeah, there's here somewhere. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, having no further business, we stand adjourned.